Okay,
Yes,
great.
please. Thank you.
Recording in
Thank
progress.
you.
Thank you so
I'm not
much.
doing it to YouTube. It's just ordinary recording, Zoom recording. Please continue.
Thank you. Thank you. So hello, everyone. This is Georgia Manetta, and I would like to introduce you to Mr. David Courtney. David is an English language teacher who is teaching in Palestine in a preparatory program of English. And he is going to talk about extensive reading for a new purpose in Palestine. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Georgia. And it's nice to be here. I think I've tried to present for the last 3 years, and different time conflicts have prevented it. So I'm really glad to be here today. Could everybody say hello in the chat? Make sure that we know how to use it. I'll start. I'll say hello. And can everyone write a message about how much experience do you have with extensive reading? I see Dr. Rob Waring is here, so that might not be necessary in all cases, but I hope everyone's doing well today. Okay, a lot. 3.5. Zena, is that out of 5, or is that the number of years?
3.5 years.
Oh, great. Yeah. I'm going to put 5 years. That's about how long I've been doing it. Okay, so I'll get started here to make sure that we can stick to the time somewhat. So about myself, I'm an English language teacher in Al-Quds Bard, which is it's called the Al-Quds Bard Academy. It was started last year, so I was the first. I get to be the first teacher in this program, which means I got to innovate in a new situation. So these are some of my students and some administrators who are with the program from taken last fall. For today's session, if you would like to, I'd encourage you to take some notes. I have a little suggested guided notes that I'll share later next. And to introduce my setting, those students that you saw, they're coming from different towns in the West Bank. So, Jenin, Nablus, a couple people from Jericho, East Jerusalem. I actually live in Bethlehem and commute to campus every day. So it's quite an intense experience living there. And students who come from different towns, there is kind of they don't usually mix with students from other towns. So there can often be, a lot of effort to create community and trust and rapport on top of all the usual academic skills that we're trying to help students do. So, of course, Palestine is also beautiful, and I don't mean to only talk about the challenges. There's a lot of beautiful olive tree groves, for example. And sometimes I like to go hiking, and we have some great examples of the local wildlife in the area. So today's session, I want to keep it simple as we share our experience with extensive reading for non-readers, and give you some ideas for activities, but you could also share some ideas that have worked for you and results from this year, and as a way to set goals for extensive reading in all of our settings. So hopefully you can adapt or adopt what we're sharing today. So as a quick story, I gave students extensive reading because I realized that they were really good speakers, but their reading and writing skills were lacking. And they need to reach a university level after 1 year. So a lot of students started at A2 level. So how could I, use speaking to help support reading and writing? I thought extensive reading was a good way to do that. So we had an opportunity, as we inherited some texts that had been copied because it is very hard to access leveled readers. And so I wanted to see, okay, if we implement extensive reading, could I make a case for funding for more resources for next year? One issue that I found was that students did not always have time to read at home. And so I had to make some adjustments about how I used class time. I also added speed reading, and that was something that students really loved as an additional fluency focus. And I noticed that by the end, their self-confidence in a number of ways and a number of improvements occurred with their reading. And the question is, was I able to set up what I needed to do a better job next year? Okay, so this is kind of like the summary of the story. That note paper that I asked, I have one, if you would, you could just write number 1, 2, and 3. And that's a way that I do this with my students, especially online, to keep them so that they're able to keep track of my lesson. But it's kind of optional for you, but I wanted to, I'll go through it on modeling it here so you can do it if you like. So I'll show this image later to keep everyone on track, okay? So the main ideas as you take notes, the first part is going to be why we use ER. And then the second part is activities that worked last year and for me, and results in setting goals, okay? So what is ER? Why is ER good for non-readers? I think we already said hello, but in the chat, if you would, can you share why you've used ER or not? And I mean, why you have or have not used ER. What are some good reasons? And if you like, I think we're a pretty small group, so you could also share out loud if you prefer. And Rob says to build reading confidence. I think that's really important. Yeah, Trina, go ahead. You have a question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so just to go back, you said one of the reasons is they don't have time for ER at home. Are you talking about they don't have time because of other school commitments and stuff, or they don't have time because of something specific to your context, like they have to do work at home, they have to take care of siblings and things like that?
I think it's mostly family commitments and the commute. A lot of them have to travel an hour or two each way.
Okay.
And not everyone. So
yeah, sorry if I missed that.
That's okay. And I'll try to provide more detail a little bit later on in the session. Yeah, that's a good question. So Zena says to increase reading speed. Yeah, that makes sense. And then Georgia says, my students are at a basic level of English, so I wanted to know them better. I'm interested in starting to implement it this year. It will make them getting used to using English and forget the fact that they have to study. Yeah, okay. I think these are all valid reasons and pretty similar to my own, what I've found with my students. So I think people are familiar with these two types of reading. And if you've attended, if you are new with extensive reading, I just wanted to give a quick summary. I know that more authors have described this, but I've included Waring and Grabe and Stoller as kind of my as main authors here. So for intensive reading, the teacher provides the reading lesson, an actual reading class. Texts are slightly above students' current level. Some vocabulary must be explicitly taught. Teacher supports the student background knowledge. Sometimes, for example, they might give pre-reading tasks or helping them learn strategies to cope with harder texts. So that's intensive reading, like reading class. Extensive reading is more about easy texts. Usually it's outside of class, not as during a class lesson. Texts are at or below students' current level, and the authors describe it as I-1 in some cases, which I really like. I think that's helpful. Students have to know 95 to 98%, depending on what the what study it is. But knowing that without using a dictionary, without having to reread or look up words on every single page, so it reduces frustration. And the teacher's support is ideally it's not needed because the student can get through the book by themselves. Reading should be for fun, and the student should choose the text for their own interests or self-purpose. And text fluency is a main goal. Can they finish the text without frustration? So it's a kind of a different paradigm. It's, intensive reading is most of my students were familiar with just intensive reading, and most of them had never done extensive reading. So what are the biggest differences? Here's a little quiz here. Which of these is not for extensive reading? A, the text is easy. B, texts are chosen by students. Or C, text is hard and requires a teacher's support. Let's see. Okay. I think we're getting. Yep. So I see a couple correct answers here. And I don't mean to say it's like black or white, but this is in general. What's going on here? Okay, C is the right answer. Yes. So to summarize, but both can build vocab size, fluency, stamina for reading, main idea comprehension, critical thinking. Okay. So I think this is all review for most people. So why is it a good idea? For my students, they would often do debates and had pretty good communication in English. They could, communicate ideas fluently, but they were not very strong readers. And a lot of them, there's a wide range of ability, initial reading level that they had. So I wanted to give them chances to read and share what they're reading, and use creativity when they read as a less pressured form of reading. And about my students, not all of them were readers. So when I did a pre-survey here, when I asked them if they read in their free time, do they read for English study? Well, about half the class don't know if they really read in their free time. A lot of them read just for English study. So, and I asked them about that, and they said it's about, just studying when they're in class reading. Reading for fun, also a lot of them disagreed. They don't really think of themselves as reading for fun. Do they read books in their first language, which is Arabic? A lot of them, some of them do, but a lot of them do not. So all of this is part of why I wanted to give extensive reading for them, because it is another advantage is to help introduce them to reading. So on number 1 on your paper, if you like, you could list some ideas. What are some benefits of ER now that I've shared a little more information? Can you think of some specific? We had a couple ideas before, but I wanted to check in again. Did something resonate with you about what I was sharing that you think, why is extensive reading a good idea? And you could share out loud too, if you like. And Georgia says self-confidence, building vocab. Zena says vocabulary. Yeah, what else? If you'd like to share, go for it. speed. Yes, speed. It's kind of surreal, actually, having so many people participating here who have read. Not feeling, Georgia says, not feeling intimidated by a second language. Yes. Familiar with sentence structure. Okay. And see, Rob, you said building connections. What did you mean by that?
Okay, so if traditionally our field often sees the vocabulary and grammar as two separate things. And so when we teach grammar, we teach it separately, we teach vocabulary separately, but actually it's a lot of languages lexical-grammatical. They go together, so like collocations, for example, you see relationships between words which go together well, words which don't sound good together, and often there's no rules for them. So we'd say, for example, beautiful girl, we don't usually say handsome girl. So these kind of connections, you're not going to pick up in a dictionary. Nobody's going to actually teach you what these connections are. So the idea is by meeting massive exposure, you're going to slowly pick up what sounds good and what doesn't sound good. And it's not until you build that connection that you're going to actually use it yourself. So it's about building those sorts of connections.
Okay, I appreciate that. So I don't know if I included, so I wrote some answers. And I also wanted to include that it's personalized because we want to include students' interests when I'm teaching. I care about what are their interests. I think it can also lead to a more positive views about reading by students. They are motivated because they can actually finish the texts. They can level up. They can speed up. So there's ways that students can track their own progress. I put something here about vocab. Exposure to high frequency words frees up space for new academic words. I'm trying out a cognitive perspective there. I don't know if that's actually proven or not, but it seems like a logical leap. Did you have a thought about that? Did anyone have a thought about that notion? Is it because they're seeing these higher frequency words? Does that make it easier for them to learn academic words in an intensive reading? Or is it like, do we know how that is that in play here?
I would say that the high frequency words, once they've been learnt, I think it frees up attentional resources for other things. Once you've automatized the high frequency words, you can then start to automatize the other words at the middle frequency and the lower frequency words. So I wouldn't say it was just academic words. It would be middle frequency words or low frequency words, some of which may be academic, some of which may be business or TOEIC words or specialist words. But yeah, okay. Generally speaking, the more exposure you've got, the more comfortable you're going to be, the more automatic it's processed, so that you can leave attention resources for other things.
All right. Okay. So I think that's important because students came in with really low, some of them had lower level reading. So for some students, a really common word is a low frequency word. So what I liked about ER is that I'm able to give students a chance to start a little bit below whatever their level is, and then they're able to level up over time. So I'm going to share the results a little bit later of that, some of the data that I collected. So the second item is, what activities can students do with ER? This is the text, kind of the makeshift library that I described earlier. And first of all, why do my students read in English? I try to provide a balanced, scope here, so they can meet vocab, they can read it, so that they can read faster, they can comprehend better, they can think critically, and they can use reading to help their speaking and their writing. Because I'm still at a stage, they need to develop, communicative competence, not just, it's not only about reading, although reading is sort of like an engine, I feel, in my context. So what activities do my students do? Because extensive reading it shouldn't be teacher led necessarily, although I can facilitate. the most important starting point is that students are choosing a text, and how can I make that easier for them? I'll go through a few different examples of activities that we did to help students choose a text, some while reading activities. And I'm also going to talk about a little bit about speed reading and how we added that to the program using some free resources from the extensive reading. And I'll share those sources in a moment. So how did this work? Well, my students study 25 hours a week. So they have all morning, and then they have a couple hours in the afternoon for lab. So in the morning, it's mostly language development focus, like intensive skills, integrated skills. So they'll do intensive reading and grammar and speaking, listening, writing, and they'll use reading to guide their writing process. And each week we'll have a certain theme, and we'll use content-based instruction and PBL, project-based learning, as those are the mix of approaches that we use. In the afternoon, we have labs, and usually the labs are almost like an elective course that students get into more content. And I decided to devote some time of lab for extensive reading because students were having, after a few weeks, it was clear that students needed more time built in for extensive reading. So I decided, starting in week 5, I gave more time for extensive reading during labs. Before that, it was really more about, helping them choose a book and then giving them some activities and ways to reflect on their reading. But I decided it needed to be more interactive, and we could do that during class. So what activities do my students do? I put some examples here. So book pass is one. When they're choosing a new book, they are going to, I give them a little table that they're going to write, and basically students choose 3 or 4 books from the library. They skim the cover, the back, and the captions. They read the first page. Can they get through that page without using a dictionary, or maybe looking up one word? If so, then they should keep that level. If not, they should go down one level. So I have them write in the table for that book, and then they repeat for 2 or 3 more books. And then they can share with their classmates which book and why with their group. So the table kind of looks like this. I'll have them write this on their paper, and then, title, author, how many times do I need a dictionary for the first page? I won't read it because, okay. And I might give them more space, but this just gives me a little bit of, they can go through a little process to choose the book. And it's kind of relaxed, and it's kind of, it's going to help them be aware, okay, their vocab is a huge indicator of what level are they. Should they stay at this level of book, or should they go down a level? So some suggestions. I think I'm repeating myself here. If they didn't like the book, that's another aspect, of course. So they could trade with somebody. And each week a writing was due. I told them to take their time, but try to finish a book in 1 or 2 weeks was a goal that we thought was doable. So they keep the book until they finish it. They check out the book. They used a list. And this year, I think I'm going to use this application called Book Buddy because, spoiler alert, I was given a materials grant, and I was able to purchase a bunch of level readers. I just gave away the game there, but that's okay. So students learned this procedure, and they became comfortable with checking out books on their own. I give them a little bit of time to do that at least once or twice a week, to check in. Hey, did you finish your book? Remember, you need to keep reading. Okay. So thinking cubes is another activity that I did with students to talk while they're reading. And they didn't have to be reading the same book necessarily, but basically I took a piece of paper and divided it to make a cube. And I could write the questions myself, or students could write them. But I think the first few times I did it. So what is one new thing you learned in the text? What is similar in your life? Write for a minute. How many keywords can you write in 1 minute? What idea do you disagree with? What change is the reading asking for? If it was more advanced, I think in one important choose one paragraph, draw what you see. Students would work in groups and roll the dice, and then whatever task they had, they would do it for their book and then talk about it. And that was a fun way to do book circles when I added it to lab, like I talked about. Okay. Jigsaws are really good if students are reading the same text. And that's kind of an important key there. So I think if you know about jigsaws, you divide the text into 3 or 4 parts. And, the first round students, part A would be from group A would focus on questions, or they could write questions, quiz questions that the other groups will answer. Or they might have discussion questions that I provide. The same thing for part B in the text is group B, part C, group C, part D, group D. And then mixed groups in the second round, then students can teach each other about their section. And sometimes the students are taking notes, or they are, maybe they're trying to answer the questions that student A wrote. Those are some ideas. Okay, so bookmarks is another way that I was checking in with students to hold them accountable a little bit. So doing a bookmark means that once a week, I ask students to kind of pause from reading, and they could write the date, your name, the title, what pages, what new vocab you found. So far, this book is about what my favorite character is blank because blank. I liked. Next, I predict that. I don't understand what. And this book is similar, different to real life. Okay, so these are all examples, but if they turn in a bookmark at least once a week, then I know that it got them in the habit of processing or thinking back, reflecting on what they read. And I did collect those as participation for that. So finally, speed reading. Apart from their leveled readers, I'd have students read 2 texts twice a week for 8 to 10 weeks, as recommended by Nation in 2012. So my sources for speed reading, and it would only take about 10 minutes to do, Sonia Millett's Victoria University of Wellington's resources, which are free, and Regina Weaver's Daily Departures. These are provided in the slides. I'll share those again in the chat. And the video that Paul Nation describes the procedure for doing this, I pretty much followed it exactly. So there's a YouTube video, but I have it linked here for your use. Okay. The nice thing about speed reading is there's a progress graph. So students really like to, when they see what their time is, they put a check mark, and then they answer 10 questions about the reading, and they can see if their score is improving or not. So they can see a lot of progress, and they get really motivated. So they read the first text once. When they're finished, they write the time. After that, they answer 10 questions, and then without looking back at the text. And finally, they read the second text and repeat. So after 8 to 10 weeks, I was able to see some results. So quick quiz, which activity can work when students are reading the same text? You can write this in the chat, or so is it reading cubes, jigsaw, bookmarks, or all 3? Okay, so we see Paul says Jigsaw, Zena says all three. I think, so my intention was all three. Yep. And or any of them individually. Yep. So, okay. So for number 2, I want to hear from you guys because I think I was talking a lot there. So are there 1 or 2 activities that you could adapt in your setting, or what other ways have you done extensive reading successfully? Have you guys tried some of these activities during reading, or holding students accountable? Would someone like to share an example? And you can do this in the chat, or you could share out loud if you like. And to clarify, my students are 18 to 19 years old. They're in a preparatory program, and their goal is to enter university in a liberal arts style program, all in English, after 1 year. So you might have a different setting, but what I'm reading in the chat here, they like bookmarks and cubes. Yeah. I think it could work for younger learners too, Georgia. And you could adapt it, I think, for their language needs.
Exactly. That's why I said that. Yes. Thank you.
Nice. Any other ideas, or has anyone tried one of these in a different way?
Rob, Rob
Yeah.
here. So one thing you can do is get a student to read a book, and then they write their questions on the cube. They then give the cube to a student who's not read the book and say, you have to find the answers to these questions. At the end, I'll test you by rolling the dice.
Love it. I love it. Thank you. And you've done, Zena's done right in the table. Like, so students, you mean for the book pass activity, Zena?
The students, especially the X reading, the graded readers, parents really want to track what is the progress of the readers, and I'm actually using the table. That's pretty much similar.
Oh, I see. The table, like keeping track of like what they read and their.
Yeah, what is the name of the book, and what was the character, and what did you like, and how many days or how many hours have you spent, something like the table. And all that answers help me to track the information to come back to the parents.
Oh, that's really good. I've had students, I had them keep track using a Google form every week. And they were able to tell me like how much time they spent reading. And that's one reason why I needed to make a change, because I realized at home they weren't having enough time. So I think it's important to get some feedback from students to learn, okay, am I providing them enough resources to actually do the reading?
Another thing I am doing this, I just cut all the new words and just putting that on a table, and like a playing card, they can pick up the one paper and the saying the sum of this, the character of that word, what kind of word is that noun or verb? So something like the play game, is a card.
Oh, I really like that. I hope to learn more about that, Zena, if you have time sometime during this conference. Great. So I think to wrap up, I'm going to share some results, and hopefully it will give you some encouragement. I started a few minutes late because of, would I be able to have a few minutes, like 5 extra minutes?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Okay. So the third part is, what are some results from extensive reading, and what goals can you set, and what data helped me get more funding to expand the library and improve it. So what I was looking for was, I wanted students' independent reading level to increase. Could it increase to B2 or above for my students? Because their starting level was closer to A2, and some students were A2 or B1, based on the first book that they selected. So I was using the Oxford Bookworms series, and each of those is, lined up with a CEFR reading level roughly. Another thing I looked for was what matters to students when choosing a book. What factors are most important for them? Number 3, I wanted evidence of reading speed increasing or not. And 4, increased reading motivation. And I did a pre-survey, post-survey, and weekly check-ins with students for that. And I wanted students to see if students' awareness that ER had a positive impact. So I won't go through all of it because it would take too long. So the slides are going to be available as a resource, but how much did their reading level change from February to June? Students chose text at their independent reading level. That means it's like their I-1. And there was a change. So these are some great photos around the extensive reading time. Actually ended up giving them some time for this during the labs. So from February, these are the, so this is on the y-axis is the number of students, and the x-axis is level 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And this is what the students, this is the range that the students had at the beginning. So in February, March, April, May, June. So their independent reading level went roughly to B2. Most students had started a B2 book by the end of all students had read at least one B2 level book by June. So that was really powerful to see. Now, something happened. Students took time to get used to the easy reading level. What I mean is, let's see. You'll see that in March. In February, this is the first book that they chose. 1 month later, it looks like, okay, what happened here? Level 5, they actually went down to level 4. Level 2, some of them went backwards to level 1. Okay, so what the challenge is, it took students time to get used to the easy reading level. They wanted to choose a higher level, and I had to frame the easy reading level for low students, because they were worried. A lower student said, I'm frustrated. I tried level 3. I need to use a dictionary too much. I need to read higher level text than this for university next year. I need to start higher or I won't reach this goal. Okay, in their mind, that's how they're thinking about it. But I had to remind them, I said, start at level 1. It's okay. You need to see the vocab over and over. Think about the story, keep your attention, and you will feel good because you finished the book. Read 1 or 2 books at this level and then move up to the next level. You have to start low to reach a higher level. So students managed to climb levels by trusting the process, but it took a month or so. I think they were trying too hard to go beyond, to push themselves, because they'd never, I think it's because they were used to intensive reading and not extensive reading. So that's one takeaway. Another, and I'll jump to the end here, but what matters to students when choosing a text? Is the text interesting? Is the level easy to find the text? Do you have enough time, or other? We did online extensive reading also. I'm not including that in this presentation because it's a whole nother topic, but for both online and printed reading, it looked like that the topic is interesting was the #1 factor for a lot of students. And then the level being easy. Other has to do with things like internet connection when I ask students, or I think that was the number one thing that stood out. I don't remember for the printed reading. Over each week, it pretty much maintained. Blue is the text is interesting as a factor why they chose the book. Okay, so week 0 to week 14, or 3 to 14. So interesting topic was that's a takeaway from my class. I don't know if it's true always, but that was something interesting, I thought. So another challenge was the time. We were doing speed reading in lab, but in those surveys, students were telling me that they didn't have enough time at home to do the extensive reading some weeks. So I would ask them, did you read at home last week? I also talked to them, but right around week 8, we were having a drop off in, if 3 or 4 students aren't doing it, that's a real problem. So I included 2 labs a week. We just added a 30 to 45 minute routine speed reading, and then extensive silent reading, and then these written response or reading activities and sharing. And that gave them a meaningful use of lab time. I wanted to make sure they benefited from extensive reading. So my takeaway is teachers can make adjustments to make sure ER meets students' needs, because it's all about students in this case, and it should be anyway. Speed reading was really a favorite activity by students, loved it. Some of them started at the lower level, and by the end of the semester, everyone was at the 1000 level or the 2000 level text for speed reading. And these are some examples of what they look like. Okay. Okay. So motivation, I just want to, they enjoyed it. They would say, I'm excited. I feel good about it. Everyone was feeling positively, at least, about it. During the semester, it sort of maintained that they were excited or felt good. Their awareness, I'm just going to say, they became more aware about, what are their weaknesses with reading. They used to think, I don't understand some of the words. I can't read a lot of papers. They're saying very general things, but then later in week 14, forgetting some ideas and getting stuck when I see new vocab. So they're being more specific about, what are their weaknesses in reading. And I think that's, progress. What are their goals? I'll skip ahead. It says, did you meet your goals in reading, or which? And some of them had a number of books they wanted to read. So they wanted to read 5 books and they did it. This semester, I've met my aims that are reading fluently with understanding written words to benefit. That's a little bit of translation going on there. But again, it's the students, I tried to inform them that these benefits were part of the process, and a lot of them bought into it, I think. And these are their responses. So now I can read a long story in level 4 with Need Dictionary. This person was a lower level reader, but they're also able to reflect a little bit about it. So how do you think it helped your reading skills? I asked the students. They are able to give a lot of the benefits that we're looking for and that the literature says supports, right? So to keep it simple, this is summarizing what students thought, how it helped them. Okay. So limitations, the sample size varied some weeks for the surveys, and we had a small sample for the post survey because life is hard and it's hard to sometimes follow up on everything. So students also had lower attendance in the spring. Sometimes they were absent for a lab, and that affected. So my takeaway is teachers should check in often, make sure that ER fits students' needs. And these were some challenges that we were able to overcome. So we needed more funding to expand the library so that we can give access to this for all EFL division students. I shared this data with administrators and it was approved. So I've actually just ordered a bunch of books and I'm going to take them with me for the fall, and we'll expand it to all of the students in the other programs. Okay, I don't think that we have time. I don't want to keep you too late here. I apologize for going over. I had a quiz here, but what 2 adjustments were needed in my setting. I had to use some class time for ER because students' busy home lives, and reminding students to start low for the process to work. Because that was not intuitive for them. They kind of wanted to start higher. Do you guys want to say as number 3, what are 1 or 2 things that you could take from this session, or have you found a similar challenge that that it was the teacher, why it's so important that the teacher check in with students? Have you had students kind of like, because we have a very intense program, we have to go through and develop intensive skills, but have you had this kind of challenge where you had to check in with students and kind of almost accommodate their lives somewhat? Or have you had this type of challenge? Or what's something that you could use or take away from this?
Yeah, all the time. The challenge is always the time to get the students to read. No matter what you do, they'll always find a reason not to do it unless they're really highly motivated. And that's the trick for us teachers, is to make it relevant for them. And if we can't make it relevant for them, then in some ways we have to require it of them, because in the end we're being paid to teach them something. And if they don't learn it, then we're not really doing our job. So I think we just have to encourage them and know your library. Encourage them as much as you can, get them to think of times when they can read, and just focus. It's always a challenge.
Yeah.
David, only me is teacher. The rest of them are gone. So you are doing great job, and I really appreciate. So however it is, looks like the small details, but everything is necessary. So you are doing great job.
Yeah, great. Thank you. But we do need to stop the recording now, because of course,
the next session starting in about 3 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks very much for that, David. Thank you very much indeed. I'll stop the recording and I'll let the ERF have that.
All right, and we'll share the resources in the link as well. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Sure, David,